Hello, and welcome to Stewardship Stories, a podcast about taking care of land. This episode is an interview with Paul Strasburg of Worthington, Massachusetts. I should say before we start that I've known and admired Paul for a while now. As part of my work with the Hilltown Land Trust, I've monitored the conservation restrictions they hold on his property. Visiting his place and getting to walk in the woods with him and hear what he's up to is always a good time for me, so I thought you might enjoy it too. I should also note that you may hear some chainsaw noise in the background of this interview. As you'll hear, Paul is a landowner who enjoys making his land available for others to use, and so he had some people clearing a trail back in the woods while we were doing the interview.
I'm Paul Strasburg. I live in Worthington, Massachusetts. I've been here in Worthington since 1981, more or less, and I've been on this particular place since 1989. So coming up on 20 years. I grew up in southern Arizona, a very hot, dry place without a lot of trees around it, and I never forget the first day I set foot in New England. I felt like I'd come home. Something had been missing from my life all along. We had friends who lived in Worthington, so we came to visit them. They were good friends, and I enjoyed being close to them, but I just found a sense of community in this small town. Community that was, alive, diverse economically in terms of interests. It had a lot of interesting people doing interesting things, and they were kind of open to an outsider coming in and being part of that community. That felt good. It also had a sense of history, which has always been really important to me. Where do we come from? Where are we going? What's this all about? And Worthington is just rich with that kind of history. Every piece of land has a story behind it. So I loved it, and I love the natural environment. I love the social environment. I love the political environment here. I liked it all. It just felt comfortable to be here. Well, my favorite place is a little stream that runs down through the middle of the woods, along a stone wall. It used to be pasture, obviously. Now it's fully grown up in woods. And it's a place where it's not a big stream at all, but it is perennial. You can leap over it in most places, but this particular place, it's tumbling down in little waterfalls. It's just beautiful. I go there and just sit and listen to the sound of the water. It's so wonderful. But, I love walking through all of it. I love the trails. I love the fields. I like the clear cuts. I love being in the clear cuts because you can see from year to year this incredible, massive change. It's a measure of the power of regeneration of these woods if you just do the right thing by them. It's amazing.
There are really two parts to Paul Strasburg's story: land conservation and land stewardship. First, we'll hear him talk about land conservation. Paul has protected 370 acres in Worthington, a huge amount of woods. This land is even more important because it connects two state forests, making a big enough block of habitat that large animals like moose and bears can thrive. He's protected this land by donating conservation restrictions, voluntary agreements to not develop the land, to the Hilltown Land Trust. These conservation restrictions will stay with the land forever. I asked Paul how he came to acquire so much land and what inspired him to conserve it.
My wife and I at that time were living in California. We had been in Worthington, and then I'd moved out to California for work. And neighbors, friends who were here called and told us that this farm was for sale. And they were concerned that it was ripe for subdivision and development because it had a lot of road frontage, dirt roads, but still legally developable lots. And it was a difficult decision because we were 3,000 miles away, but we loved this part of the country and we loved this community. So we decided to go ahead and buy the farm with the idea of preventing development from happening here, keeping some places open, because a lot of small parcel development was going on around us, not knowing what the future would bring. And so we held on to this land without doing much for probably 10, 12 years, maybe, something like that. And then my work situation changed and I could spend a lot more time back here, so I came back and I got more involved with the community. A few years later, I don't remember exactly when it was probably in 1995 or 1996, something like that, and a neighboring piece of property came up for sale. It didn't come up for sale, but it was in jeopardy because that landowner was having difficulty making payments on taxes and so on, and was quite elderly and unable to maintain it. And so through negotiations, I ended up buying that parcel, which is about 140 acres, with the express purpose of putting it into a conservation restriction. That was the first conservation restriction. I had always intended to do that with the part I was living on, but other things had intervened. I hadn't gotten around to it. But
how did you hear about the concept of a conservation restriction and decide that was something you wanted to do?
Through friends in the community, actually. The friend that was responsible for my first coming to Worthington, Tony Lake, had a meeting at her house one night, and the Hilltown Land Trust was just, I think, getting organized. It was young anyway at that point. And a forester named Lincoln Fish came and talked about land conservation and about the value of this particular piece of western Massachusetts for preservation as wildlands as much as possible and so on. So at that point, I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. I should do that. And never got around to doing anything. But when the second piece of land came up for sale, I knew that it would help me a lot to have a tax deduction in order to facilitate the purchase. So when I bought it and immediately put a conservation restriction on it. So that was the second parcel. And then sometime later, another, I think, a little piece of land across the road from me here that had a beaver pond on it and some woods it was only 7 acres. It had been bought for the purposes of development. It was right on the corner where 2 roads come into my property. And I was a little unhappy that it had been bought for development, that another house was going to go up there. But it didn't pan out. They staked it out and were ready to dig a foundation, and then financing or something got bad. So they put it on the market, and I snapped it up immediately and held on to that for conservation. Later, another parcel came up with a distressed neighbor who was having trouble paying taxes. So we worked out an arrangement where I bought a piece of that land to put under conservation restriction and left her a piece. And the purchase price was enough to cover her taxes and get her back on a sounder financial footing. So, and then immediately that was put under conservation restriction. And then eventually the third parcel, which was the original piece that we live on, and that little beaver pond piece across the road, were put into a conservation restriction. So now all the land that I own is under conservation restriction. And I don't intend to buy any more land. But you never know.
You don't intend to buy any more land? Like if another distressed neighbor came to you and wanted to sell their land, you wouldn't?
I think at this point I've got more land than I can manage properly and responsibly myself, and I'm not into buying land just for buying land. I think my first course of action would be to try to convince some other people in town to do the same thing, because development is definitely coming. We see it along the immediate road fronts here that haven't been put under conservation restriction. There are 2.5 to 4.5, 5 acre plots houses on those plots going up all over the place. And people have to have a place to live, but it's becoming kind of sprawl. And I'm concerned that there won't be open lands for people to walk on and hunt on and the woods to grow on. So.